In West Hollywood's elite Iron Temple Fitness Center, an elderly man in sweatpants was about to be humiliated. A routine gym livestream turned deadly for reputations when a social media bodybuilder mocked the wrong senior citizen. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical retiree. For decades, he served as an elite martial artist, a black belt in multiple disciplines, and the founder of his own combative system known worldwide for defeating opponents without ever raising his voice. When Titan, a self-obsessed influencer, stormed over to film a mocking confrontation, he had no idea he was taunting the embodiment of silent power. Chuck responded with a single movement, effortless demonstration that would dismantle ego, ignite a philosophical reckoning, and leave the gym frozen mid-set. What began as a viral prank would become a lesson in mastery. The Iron Temple would never be the same after Chuck Norris reminded everyone that real strength doesn't perform, it simply exists. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Iron Temple Fitness Center was more of a theater than a gym. Nestled in the heart of West Hollywood, its massive glass facade reflected the California sun like a beacon, drawing in celebrities, influencers, and anyone willing to pay the astronomical membership fees. Inside, the space pulsed with a peculiar energy, part fitness sanctuary, part social media studio. The clanging of weights provided percussion for a constant symphony of camera shutters, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of egos being fed. At the center of this carefully curated chaos stood Titan-born Bryce Maddox Girling, a dumbbell that weighed as much as a small child. His 6'2" frame, sculpted to anatomical perfection through years of obsessive training, and, as some whispered, pharmaceutical assistance, glistened under the strategic lighting. Each bicep peaked like a mountain range as he completed his 15th rep, roaring loud enough to momentarily silence conversations across the gym floor. "That's how it's done. That's how a real man lifts," Titan shouted, slamming the weight down with theatrical force. He flexed directly into the camera held by Devin DJ Jackson, the gym's youngest staff member who'd been assigned to manage the fitness center's social media presence, a role that had somehow evolved into being Titan's personal hype man and videographer. "Yo, we've got over 5,000 people watching live right now," DJ exclaimed, his eyes wide as he checked the stream metrics. At 22, he still carried the enthusiastic energy of a teenager, bouncing on his heels as he circled Titan, capturing every angle of the bodybuilder's physique. "Comments are blowing up, man. They're loving this." Titan grabbed a towel, dabbing at non-existent sweat on his forehead. He'd barely begun his actual workout, but the performance had started the moment he walked through the door. "Tell them to hit those like buttons. We're just getting started." He scanned the gym like a predator seeking prey, looking for his next content opportunity. "Who's trying to get famous today?" Across the floor, Lena Torres exhaled slowly, the kind of controlled breath that kept her from saying what she really thought. At 35, she'd been a personal trainer long enough to see fitness trends come and go, but this new breed of social media peacocking tested her patience daily. She guided her client, a middle-aged film producer, working through shoulder rehabilitation, through a careful movement pattern. "Just ignore him," she murmured, adjusting the woman's form. "Focus on quality over quantity. Real strength builds quietly." The Iron Temple's doors slid open, admitting a shaft of sunlight and a figure that moved with such quiet efficiency that few noticed his entrance. Chuck Norris, dressed in simple gray sweatpants and a navy blue t-shirt, nodded politely to the receptionist. At 85, his face carried the weathered lines of a life fully lived, but his posture remained impeccable. Shoulders square, spine straight, steps measured and deliberate. Unlike the flashy gym bags and branded gear surrounding him, Chuck carried only a small duffel and a water bottle. He moved toward the far corner of the gym, a quieter space with basic equipment, pull-up bars, a few kettlebells, and an open mat area. It was the least photographed section of the gym, lacking the dramatic lighting and mirrors that dominated the central floor. Chuck set down his bag, took a sip of water, and began a series of simple stretches, his movements fluid and precise, despite his age. Maya Lin noticed him immediately. The 28-year-old amateur MMA fighter had been working on heavy bag combinations when the martial arts legend walked in. She paused, watching him from across the gym with quiet respect. Unlike most patrons, she recognized the disciplined economy in his warm-up. Nothing wasted. Nothing for show. She nodded slightly in his direction before returning to her own training, though her eyes occasionally drifted back to observe his technique. Meanwhile, Titan had found his next target, a skinny college student struggling with proper form on the bench press. Titan strutted over, DJ trailing behind him like a faithful shadow. "Look at this, folks," Titan announced to the camera. "This is how not to build a chest. You'll snap your spine before you get any gains, bro." He laughed, a booming sound designed to draw attention rather than express genuine amusement. The young man flushed with embarrassment as Titan took over the bench, adding 3 plates to each side. "Let me show you how a real man does it." The college student slunk away, head down, as the small crowd that perpetually orbited Titan gathered to watch his impromptu demonstration. DJ positioned himself for the optimal angle, making sure to capture both Titan's impressive lift and the admiring faces of onlookers. "Make sure you tag me when you post this," Titan instructed between reps, his voice barely strained despite the substantial weight. "And tell everyone to follow at Titan Rules for their free workout plan. First 50 subscribers get personalized video feedback." Lena caught the eye of the embarrassed student and waved him over. "Hey, your form wasn't that bad," she said quietly. "You just need to keep your shoulders retracted. Want me to show you?" On the other side of the gym, Chuck had progressed to a series of bodyweight exercises, perfect form pull-ups that looked effortless despite his age, followed by controlled push-ups, each one executed with textbook precision. He moved with a fluidity that spoke of decades of disciplined practice, each motion connecting to the next, like flowing water. Maya, finishing her bag work, grabbed her water bottle and moved closer to Chuck's corner, beginning her cool-down stretches within view. She didn't approach or interrupt him. There was an unspoken code of respect among serious martial artists, but her positioning was deliberate. This was an opportunity to learn by observation. The gym continued its regular rhythm. The serious athletes focused on their training, the casual members chatting between sets, the influencers performing for their phones. 2 separate worlds coexisting in the same space, rarely intersecting. Until they did. Titan, having exhausted his bench press content, scanned the gym for his next opportunity. That's when his eyes landed on Chuck Norris, quietly working through a series of kata movements in the corner. The bodybuilder paused, watching the older man with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. He didn't immediately recognize Chuck to him. Just an old guy doing slow-motion exercises that wouldn't build any visible muscle. "Hey DJ," Titan whispered, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "I think I found our next segment." He nodded toward Chuck. "Let's see if Grandpa wants to show us his retirement home workout." DJ hesitated for the first time that day. "You sure, man? Maybe we should let him be." But Titan was already moving, camera phone in hand, his trajectory set toward the quiet corner where generations of strength training philosophy were about to collide. "Hey viewers," Titan's voice boomed across the gym as he approached Chuck. "I think we just found the most adorable thing. Check out this senior citizen fitness hour." Heads turned. Conversations paused. And in the quiet corner of Iron Temple Fitness Center, Chuck Norris continued his movements, seemingly oblivious to the approaching storm. Titan strode across the gym floor like a conquering general, each step deliberate and performative. The natural parting of people before him had become so routine he no longer noticed it, the way conversations paused, the subtle shifting of bodies to accommodate his presence, the eyes that followed his movement. Power was intoxicating that way. After a while, you expected the world to bend. Coming to you live from LA's most exclusive fitness spot, Titan announced to his phone, which he held at the perfect angle to capture both his face and his approaching target. "We're about to get a special guest appearance on today's stream." DJ trailed behind, recording with the gym's professional camera, but looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Titan, maybe we should stick to the planned content," he suggested, his voice low enough that it wouldn't be picked up on the stream. Titan waved him off without breaking his stride or his smile. "Trust me, this is going to break the internet," he replied, through gritted teeth, still beaming for his audience. Chuck continued his routine, moving through a series of controlled strikes and blocks a kata he had perfected over decades. Each movement flowed into the next, with a precision that made them appear deceptively simple, like water finding its natural path. His focus remained internal, aware of his surroundings but not distracted by them. As Titan approached, Maya Lin straightened from her stretch, her eyes narrowing. She reached for her phone, sensing what was about to unfold. "Excuse me, sir," Titan called out, his voice booming with exaggerated politeness. "My followers and I were wondering what kind of workout you're doing there. Is that some kind of senior Tai Chi?" Chuck completed his movement sequence before acknowledging the interruption. He turned slowly, his face composed and neutral as he regarded the younger man. The contrast between them was stark. Titan's bulging muscles and aggressive stance versus Chuck's balanced posture and economical presence. "It's an ancient form of Tang Soo Do," Chuck answered simply, his voice quieter than expected but carrying a natural authority that made others lean in to listen. Titan's smile widened, sensing content gold. "Tang Soo. What now? Is that like yoga for grandpas?" He turned to make sure DJ was capturing everything. "No offense, old-timer, but if you want real results, you should try lifting some actual weight. Those slow-motion karate chops aren't going to build any muscle." A murmur rippled through the gym. Near the free weights section, Lena Torres stiffened, recognizing Chuck immediately. She excused herself from her client and began moving toward the developing scene. Chuck simply nodded once. "Everyone trains for different purposes," he replied mildly. "Oh sure, I get it," Titan continued, leaning closer to the camera with a conspiratorial wink. "At your age, it's all about just staying mobile, right? Just trying not to break a hip." The live stream chat exploded with laughing emojis and encouragement for Titan, mixed with a growing number of comments trying to alert him to who he was actually talking to. DJ, reading some of the comments over Titan's shoulder, felt his stomach drop. Titan?" he began, but was immediately cut off. "How about I show you a real workout?" Titan proposed, flexing his bicep directly in front of Chuck. "Something that builds actual strength, not just whatever that slow-motion stuff is supposed to do." Chuck remained still, his eyes meeting Titan's without challenge or retreat, a complete calm that was almost unnerving in its totality. He said nothing, which only spurred Titan to fill the silence. "What's the matter? Don't think you can handle real training?" Titan pushed, his voice getting louder as he sensed his content beginning to stall. "Or maybe you're afraid to look bad in front of all these people?" From her position several yards away, Maya Lin had been quietly recording the interaction on her phone. Unlike DJ's frantic camera work trying to capture every angle of Titan's performance, Maya held her phone steady, focused on Chuck's face. She recognized something in his expression that Titan clearly missed, not intimidation or anger, but a patient assessment. "Dude, do you know who that is?" a gym member finally called out from the weight rack. Titan turned with an irritated expression. "Should I care? That's Chuck Norris, you idiot." Someone else joined in. A ripple of recognition spread through the gym. Phones came out. Whispers grew louder. DJ's eyes widened to comical proportions as he frantically mouthed Chuck Norris at Titan while making a slashing motion across his throat. For the briefest moment, uncertainty flickered across Titan's face, but he recovered quickly, his influencer instincts kicking in. This wasn't a setback. This was an opportunity. His smile broadened as he turned back to Chuck, who had remained impassively still throughout the exchange. Chuck Norris? The Chuck Norris? Titan's voice rose theatrically. Well, that just makes this even better. Folks, we've got a celebrity appearance today. He moved closer to Chuck, dropping an unwelcome arm around the older man's shoulders for the camera. But with all due respect, sir, those movie stunts were, 40 years ago? Things have evolved since then. Fitness science has come a long way. Chuck gently but firmly removed Titan's arm from his shoulder, a movement so smooth it almost looked choreographed. His face remained composed, giving away nothing. Lena had finally reached the edge of the gathering crowd. That's enough, she called out, her trainer's voice cutting through the murmurs. Everyone, give Mr. Norris his space. Oh, come on, we're just having a friendly generational exchange here, Titan protested, playing to his audience. I respect the classics, really I do. But I think the viewers deserve to see the difference between old-school martial arts tricks and real modern strength. He turned directly to Chuck. What do you say, legend? Care to show these people if you've still got it? Or would you rather stick to the senior circuit? The gym had fallen into a charged silence. Every eye was on Chuck Norris, waiting for his response to this blatant disrespect. DJ had stopped filming, his professional instincts finally overriding his loyalty to Titan. Maya continued her steady recording, her face unreadable. Chuck looked at Titan for a long, measured moment. Then, with deliberate calm, he stepped back and returned to his starting position on the mat. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Titan laughed, turning to his live stream. Well, I guess that's that. Looks like the legend knows when to back down from a reel. His words cut off abruptly as Chuck opened his eyes and addressed him directly for the first time. What exactly did you have in mind? Chuck asked, his voice carrying clearly despite its quiet tone. The gym collectively held its breath. Phones lifted higher. Titan's grin widened to predatory proportions. How about a little friendly competition? He proposed, bouncing slightly on his toes with barely contained excitement. Your old-school methods against my modern approach? Let's see which one impresses people more. Chuck considered this for a moment, then nodded once. All right. Titan turned to his live stream, eyes gleaming with triumph. You heard it here first, folks. The challenge is on. Make sure you're subscribed because this is about to be the most viral moment of the year. He lowered his voice to a dramatic whisper. We're about to see if the legend is real, or just another Hollywood myth. As Titan began excitedly outlining the competition parameters to his audience, he missed the subtle exchange happening behind him. Maya's eyes met Chuck's across the gym floor, and the martial arts legend gave her the faintest of nods, a silent communication between practitioners that spoke volumes. Lena Torres crossed her arms, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of concern and anticipation. This isn't going to go how he thinks it's going to go, she murmured to no one in particular. The stage was set. The audience gathered. And in a high-end Los Angeles gym, a clash of not just bodies but philosophies was about to unfold. Performance versus substance, showmanship versus mastery, the flashy present confronting the disciplined past. All right, legend. Let's make this interesting, Titan announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed gym. The regular soundtrack of clanking weights and pulsing music had faded as members abandoned their workouts to gather around the unfolding spectacle. 3 challenges me choice. Simple, straightforward tests of real strength and fitness. Chuck stood with relaxed alertness, hands loosely at his sides, expression neutral. He inclined his head slightly, indicating Titan should proceed. DJ had reluctantly resumed filming, though his enthusiasm had visibly dampened. He kept darting nervous glances between Chuck and the growing crowd, which now included several gym employees hovering uncertainly at the edges. "First up," Titan declared, gesturing grandly. "Deadlifts, 5 reps, maximum weight, the foundation of real strength." Lena stepped forward. "This isn't appropriate." "It's all right," Chuck interjected quietly. "I accept." Whispers rippled through the audience. Maya Lin, still recording steadily, caught a close-up of Chuck's face, not concerned, not anxious, just calmly assessing. She adjusted her position for a better angle. Titan strutted toward the deadlift platform, motioning for onlookers to clear a path. "Age before beauty," he called over his shoulder. "You can go first, Mr. Norris. Don't worry. I won't judge if you need to use lighter plates." Chuck walked unhurriedly to the Olympic bar. Without fanfare, he began loading plates, not an excessive amount, but respectable. 315 pounds. The crowd watched in silence as he methodically secured the weights, then took position. What happened next stunned the room into deeper silence. Chuck didn't strain or struggle or roar. He didn't bounce the weight or use momentum. Instead, with perfect form back flat, chest up, core engaged, lifted the barbell in one smooth, controlled motion. Up. Pause. Down. 5 repetitions, each identical to the last. Each breath measured, each movement precise. When he finished, he set the weight down gently, not dropping it for dramatic effect. Scattered applause broke out, quickly growing stronger. Chuck stepped back from the bar, his breathing barely elevated. Titan's cocky grin had faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Not bad for the senior division," he said, loud enough for his live stream to hear. "Now let me show you what modern fitness looks like." He approached the bar, immediately adding more plates until the total reached 495 pounds. The display was deliberate, meant to emphasize the difference. DJ zoomed in on the weights, then panned to Titan's face as he chalked his hands with theatrical flair. "This is how it's done in 2025, Titan shouted, grabbing the bar. His form was aggressive, back arched, neck straining, face contorted. He yanked the weight up with a primal scream, body shaking with the effort. The lift was successful, but ugly, all force. No finesse. He dropped the weight with a thunderous crash after the 5th rep, then turned to the crowd with arms raised triumphantly. "That's the difference between movie martial arts and real power," he crowed, high-fiving several supporters in the front row. But something unexpected was happening in the gym. While some cheered Titan's display of raw strength, many others were murmuring among themselves, their eyes moving between the two men with newfound assessment. "Second challenge," Titan announced before the moment could settle. "Endurance. 2 minutes of burpees, most reps wins." Simple. Again, Chuck nodded his acceptance. They took positions side by side on the open mat area. DJ counted down dramatically. 3, 2, 1, go! Titan exploded into action, throwing his body through the exercise with manic energy. Each movement was a performance, exaggerated, forceful, accompanied by grunts and facial expressions carefully crafted for camera impact. Sweat flew as he powered through rep after rep. Beside him, Chuck moved like a metronome, steady, consistent, efficient. Where Titan crashed to the floor, Chuck lowered himself with control. Where Titan threw his body upward, Chuck rose with precision. No wasted motion, no wasted energy. By the 1-minute mark, the difference was becoming apparent. Titan's pace was slowing, his movements growing sloppier. His breathing had become ragged, his face contorted with effort. Beside him, Chuck maintained the same measured tempo he'd started with, his breathing deep but controlled. When DJ called time, both men straightened. Titan immediately bent over, hands on knees, gasping for air. Chuck stood tall, breathing deeply but evenly. "Final count," DJ announced, consulting his counter. "Titan, 53. Mr. Norris, 48. "Ha!" Titan gasped between breaths, raising a triumphant finger. "That's what I'm talking about!" But the crowd's reaction was mixed. Many had noticed what the raw numbers didn't show: the difference in quality, in efficiency, in control. Maya zoomed her camera in on Chuck's face, capturing his complete lack of concern with the numerical outcome. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Final challenge. Titan declared after recovering his breath, his voice revealing a new edge of determination. This was not going entirely as planned. The older man was showing more capability than expected. And worse, was drawing admiration from the crowd. Titan's crowd. Something functional. Something real. He walked to the corner and dragged over a heavy punching bag, roughly 100 pounds. "Kettlebell hold versus punching power," he announced. 30 seconds holding a heavy kettlebell with one arm extended, then immediately 5 full power strikes on the bag. Most impressive display wins. Chuck's expression remained unchanged as he nodded once more. Titan went first this time, selecting a 35-pound kettlebell. He extended his right arm, holding the weight at shoulder height, playing up the difficulty for the camera. His arm began shaking noticeably after 15 seconds, but he persevered. Jaw clenched, veins popping. When DJ called time, he immediately dropped the weight and turned to the punching bag, unleashing a barrage of wild, powerful strikes that set the bag swinging violently. The display was impressive raw, aggressive power. "Beat that, legend," he challenged, breathing heavily but wearing a satisfied smirk. Chuck stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, selected a heavier kettlebell, 44 pounds. Without comment, he extended his arm, holding the weight steady. Unlike Titan, he didn't grimace or shake. His breathing remained deep and even. His eyes focused calmly ahead. When the 30 seconds elapsed, he dropped the kettlebell on the floor and turned to the punching bag. What happened next silenced the gym completely. Chuck didn't unleash wild haymakers or showy combinations. Instead, he delivered 5 perfectly executed strikes each. One precise, controlled, and devastatingly effective. The bag didn't swing wildly. Instead, it compacted at the point of impact, the force traveling through rather than displacing the target. The 5th strike, a right cross delivered with perfect form, landed with such focused power that the chain holding the bag creaked audibly. He stepped back, hands returning to his sides, breathing still controlled. The gym remained silent for 3 heartbeats, then erupted in spontaneous applause. Not the rowdy cheering that typically followed Titan's performances, but something more genuine: admiration from people who recognized they had witnessed true mastery. Titan stood stunned, his carefully constructed narrative collapsing around him. This wasn't how the story was supposed to unfold. The old man was supposed to look outdated, outmatched, outclassed. Instead, "I think we've seen enough of the warm-up," Titan said abruptly, his voice sharper, less performative. The showman was receding, revealing something rawer underneath. "Let's cut to the real challenge. You do martial arts, right? You're supposed to be some kind of fighter?" The mood in the gym shifted instantly. Lena stepped forward again, concern evident on her face. "That's enough, Titan. You got your content." "No," Titan snapped, his eyes fixed on Chuck. "The viewers want to see something real. Not lifting weights, not exercise drills." He stepped closer to Chuck, invading his personal space. "They want to see if the legend can actually back up his reputation." He lowered his voice, though still loud enough for those nearby to hear. Or was it all just movie magic and camera tricks? Chuck looked at him steadily, neither retreating nor advancing. The silence stretched, tension building, with each passing second. Finally, Chuck spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Titan's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Simple. Light sparring. Just movement and technique with no contact." He gestured to the open mat area. "Show everyone your famous moves. Unless..." He paused dramatically. "You're worried about how they'll look against someone who isn't a stuntman paid to fall down." The challenge hung in the air. Phones lifted higher. The live stream chat exploded with excitement. DJ looked physically pained, caught between professional obligation and personal discomfort. Maya stopped filming and stepped forward. "That's disrespectful and inappropriate," she said firmly, the first words she'd spoken throughout the entire encounter. Titan turned to her with a dismissive wave. "Stay out of this." Nobody asked for the women's division opinion. Maya's eyes narrowed dangerously. But before she could respond, Chuck raised a hand, slightly a subtle gesture that nonetheless commanded attention. "It's all right," he said calmly. He looked directly at Titan. "If you want to see technique, I'm willing to demonstrate." He walked unhurriedly to the center of the mat and turned to face Titan. The bodybuilder followed, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. This was the moment, the viral climax his content needed. "Just to be clear," Chuck said quietly, "this is demonstration only. No contact." "Of course," Titan agreed with exaggerated politeness. "Just movement. Technique. Against technique." He winked at the camera DJ reluctantly held. "May the best man win." They squared off in the center of the mat, surrounded by a circle of onlookers that had grown to include nearly everyone in the gym. The air felt charged with anticipation. Chuck stood relaxed but ready, hands open at his sides, expression calm. Titan assumed an aggressive stance, bouncing and weaving dramatically. "Whenever you're ready, legend," he taunted. Chuck nodded once and raised his hands into a simple, classic guard position. And in that moment, without a single technique being thrown, something profound shifted in the room. The way Chuck stood balanced, centered, present radiated such quiet mastery that even those with no martial arts knowledge sensed it. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't exaggerated. But it was unmistakably real. Titan sensed it too, and it triggered something primal in him, a sudden, visceral understanding that he might have miscalculated badly. His bouncing intensified, his expression hardening. "Come on," he urged, voice tight. "Show us something." Chuck remained still, simply watching, hands perfectly positioned. "What's the matter?" Titan pushed, growing visibly frustrated. "Stage fright?" When Chuck finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the hushed gym. "In true martial arts, the first lesson is patience. The second is control." Something in Titan snapped. With a sudden explosive movement, he lunged forward, abandoning all pretense of just movement, as he threw a wild haymaker aimed directly at Chuck's head. Gasps erupted from the crowd. DJ dropped his camera to his side. Maya stepped forward instinctively. But Chuck was no longer where the punch had been aimed. With a movement so subtle it almost didn't register visually, he had shifted 6 inches to the side, the minimum distance needed to avoid the strike. No wasted motion. No dramatic evasion. Just not there. Titan's momentum carried him forward, off balance, and exposed. Before he could recover, Chuck's hand was resting lightly on his shoulder, not striking, not grabbing, just placed with precision exactly where a devastating counter would have landed. The message was unmistakable to anyone with fighting knowledge. "If this were real, you would be on the floor now." Titan froze, his body registering what his ego couldn't process. Chuck removed his hand and stepped back, returning to his neutral stance. The gym was absolutely silent. In that moment of suspended reality, the line had been drawn. Not with words or fists or displays of brute strength, but with something much more profound: the gulf between appearing powerful and truly being powerful. And everyone present knew which side of that line each man stood on. The silence in the gym hung like suspended time, thick, charged, unbreakable. Titan stood frozen, arms still extended from his failed strike, face locked in an expression somewhere between shock and humiliation. The moment stretched, elongated by the collective held breath of every witness. Then, like a spell breaking, Titan straightened. His face transformed, hardening into something ugly and raw. This was no longer about content or clout or entertaining his followers. This was about salvaging his shattered pride. "That was nothing," he spat, his voice stripped of its performative charm. "A lucky dodge. Anyone could do that." He backed up a few steps, circling to his left, his body language shifting from showman to predator. DJ had lowered his camera completely now, ethical boundaries finally overriding professional obligations. "Titan. Man. Let's call it," he suggested, his normally enthusiastic voice subdued. "We got plenty of great footage already." Titan ignored him, eyes fixed on Chuck with newfound intensity. "You think you impressed anyone with that little sidestep?" he said, voice rising. "That's not fighting. That's not strength. That's just dancing around." Chuck remained centered, his posture neither aggressive nor retreating. His eyes tracked Titan's movement with calm awareness, hands still open at his sides. He said nothing, which only seemed to fuel Titan's growing rage. "My followers want to see something real," Titan continued, gesturing sharply toward the phones still recording around the circle. "Not some washed-up movie star playing pretend martial arts." From the edge of the gathering crowd, Lena took a step forward. "That's enough," she called out firmly. "This stops now, or I'm calling security." Titan's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. "Stay out of this," he snarled, before returning his focus to Chuck. "Unless the old man needs a woman to protect him?" Chuck's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in his stancean, almost imperceptible adjustment that only the most trained eye would notice. Maya caught it, her own body tensing in response. She knew what it meant. Preparation. "You know what I think?" Titan continued, voice dropping to a theatrical whisper as he moved closer to Chuck. "I think Chuck Norris is a myth. I think you've been selling people fake martial arts garbage for decades. I think you don't need to do this." Chuck interrupted quietly, his first words since the failed punch. "There's no shame in walking away." The simple statement, delivered without condescension or challenge, was somehow more devastating than any insult could have been. A flash of genuine uncertainty crossed Titan's face, a brief, vulnerable moment when another path seemed possible. Then his expression hardened again. "Don't tell me what I need," he growled. With deliberate provocation, he reached out and shoved Chuck's shoulder not hard enough to knock him down. But a clear physical boundary crossed. Collective gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher. This had escalated beyond entertainment into something uncomfortable, even dangerous. Yet no one moved to intervene, transfixed by the unfolding drama. The clear collision course between two fundamentally different philosophies of strength. Chuck absorbed the shove without stepping back, his balance unaffected. His eyes remained steady on Titan's, not with anger but with something more complex, a mixture of assessment and, perhaps most infuriatingly to Titan, compassion. "Real power isn't about dominating others," Chuck said, his voice carrying clearly despite its quietness. "It's about controlling yourself. Save the fortune cookie wisdom." Titan sneered, circling closer. The last threads of his public persona had fallen away, revealing the insecurity that had always fueled his bombastic exterior. "Show me this legendary power everyone talks about, or admit it was never real." Chuck looked at him for a long moment, then nodded consonant in agreement, but in recognition of having reached a decision. With unhurried deliberation, he stepped back and raised his hands into a proper guard position. "If you insist on this path," he said quietly, "I will demonstrate." Once. The words carried no threat, no bravado, yet they shifted the atmosphere in the room dramatically. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Lena stopped mid-step, recognizing the significance of what was about to happen. Even DJ, who had been about to physically intervene, paused. Titan, however, registered only that Chuck had finally engaged. His face split into a triumphant grin as he raised his own hands in a crude approximation of a fighting stance. "Finally!" he exclaimed, bouncing aggressively. "Let's see what Chuck Norris is really made of." The moment hung suspended. Titan coiled to spring, Chuck perfectly still. The audience holding its collective breath. No referee, no rules, no barriers between ego and consequence. Then Titan exploded forward with a roar, throwing a combination of wild punches aimed at Chuck's head and body. His movements were powerful but undisciplined, fueled by emotion rather than technique. He attacked with the confidence of someone who believed that aggression and strength were synonymous with fighting ability. That bigger, louder, and more forceful always prevailed. What happened next occurred so quickly that many observers would later debate exactly what they'd seen. Chuck didn't retreat. He didn't cover up defensively. Instead, he moved forward into the attack, not with matching aggression, but with precise, economical movements that seemed to flow around Titan's wild strikes like water around stones. None of Titan's punches connected solidly. Chuck didn't block them so much, as he simply ensured they arrived where he no longer was. Then, in a sequence so smooth it appeared choreographed, Chuck redirected one of Titan's punches with his left hand, while simultaneously stepping forward at an angle. His right hand shot out not in a punch, but in an open-handed strike that stopped a hair's breadth from Titan's throat. Freeze frame. Time suspended. Chuck's hand hovered near Titan's exposed neck, close enough that the bodybuilder could feel the displaced air. Titan's own momentum had carried him into the perfect counter position. His eyes widened with the sudden, visceral recognition of absolute vulnerability. For 3 heartbeats, no one in the gym moved or spoke. The only sound was Titan's ragged breathing. Chuck lowered his hand and stepped back, returning to a neutral stance. His breathing remained calm, his movement fluid and controlled. He hadn't even broken a sweat. "That," he said quietly, "is control." The gym erupted in a spontaneous wave of applause, the raucous cheering of spectators witnessing violence, but the appreciative recognition of witnessing mastery. Phone cameras captured everything, though no recording could fully convey the electric feeling that permeated the room. Titan stood motionless, face flushed, chest heaving. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he had no words, no comeback, no way to spin what had just happened. The narrative he'd constructed both for his audience and himself lay shattered at his feet. In the sudden vacuum of his silence, another voice filled the space. "What we just saw," Maya said clearly from the edge of the circle, "wasn't about age or strength or who can hit harder. It was about discipline, precision, and years of dedicated practice." She looked around the gathering, making eye contact with several younger gym members. That's the difference between appearing powerful and actually being powerful. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lena nodded appreciatively at Maya, before stepping forward herself. "I think we've all seen something valuable today," she announced, her trainer's voice cutting through the chatter. "And now I suggest we give Mr. Norris the space and respect he deserves." The tension broken, the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, hoping to catch a final glimpse of the legend or perhaps exchange a word with him. DJ had finally lowered his camera completely, his expression a complex mixture of awe and regret. Chuck remained where he was, his presence steady amidst the shifting energy of the room. He looked at Titan not with triumph or condescension, but with a calm assessment that somehow conveyed both boundary and invitation. The bodybuilder stood at a crossroads, his carefully constructed persona shattered, his understanding of strength fundamentally challenged. In this moment of raw vulnerability, stripped of his usual defenses, a new possibility emerged. The opportunity to learn rather than perform, to grow rather than posture. Chuck waited patiently, offering neither retreat nor aggression, just presence. And in that quiet moment, as the gym's energy swirled around them, the true confrontation was no longer between two men, but between Titan and his own ego. The next move was his, and everyone knew it would define far more than just this encounter. It would reveal something essential about who he truly was beneath the carefully crafted exterior, and perhaps who he might become. As the seconds stretched into a moment of profound decision, the real impact of Chuck Norris's demonstration was becoming clear. Not in the technique itself, but in the mirror it held up to everyone present, reflecting the difference between the appearance of strength and its authentic expression. The entire gym held its breath, waiting to see which path Titan would choose. The Iron Temple Fitness Center had witnessed countless displays of physical prowess over the years, personal records broken, muscles pushed to failure, bodies transformed through disciplined effort. But what happened next transcended mere physical achievement. Titan stood frozen in the aftershock of his own vulnerability, the ghost sensation of Chuck's hand still tingling near his throat. His carefully constructed identity built on dominance, aggression, and performative strength had crumbled in seconds. What remained was something raw and unfamiliar: humility. For a moment, rage flickered across his face, the instinctive response of a wounded ego. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, muscles tensing as though preparing for another charge. The crowd sensed it, a collective intake of breath as they waited to see if Titan would choose pride over wisdom. Chuck hadn't moved, his posture relaxed, yet ready. His eyes held Titan's steadily, not with challenge or judgment, but with a patient awareness that communicated volumes. "I see your struggle. I understand it. I've been there." "That was a trick," Titan finally said, his voice strained but loud enough for everyone to hear. "A rehearsed movie move that wouldn't work in a real fight." The words hung hollow in the air, contradicted by the evidence everyone had witnessed. Even Titan didn't seem to fully believe them. Chuck considered this for a moment, then nodded thoughtfully. "You're right about one thing," he said. "What you just saw wouldn't always work in a chaotic street fight. Real combat isn't predictable or clean." The admission surprised everyone, Titan included. His brow furrowed in confusion. "Then what was the point of all this?" he demanded, gesturing sharply at the space between them. "The point," Chuck replied, "wasn't to show you what works in a fight. It was to demonstrate the principles that underlie effective martial arts: balance, timing, efficiency of movement, and above all, control." He stepped forward, not aggressively but deliberately entering the shared space. "I'd be happy to show you more, if you're interested in learning rather than proving." The offer hung in the air, sincere, uncomplicated, and entirely unexpected. It represented a potential bridge across the chasm that had formed between them, between their different philosophies of strength. Titan's face cycled through a complex series of emotions: confusion, suspicion, wounded pride, and finally, reluctant curiosity. The gym waited in suspended animation for his response. "You're saying you'd teach me?" he asked, his voice stripped of its usual bravado. "I'm saying I'd share what I know," Chuck clarified, as one martial artist to another. Something shifted in Titan's expression, a subtle relaxing of defensive barriers. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the dozens of phones still recording, the eyes still watching expectantly, his public persona and private reaction warred visibly on his face. "All right," he said finally, straightening his shoulders. Show me one thing. Something real. Chuck nodded once, accepting both the concession and the lingering challenge within it. He gestured toward the open mat. Let's start with stance, and balance the foundation of everything else. What followed wasn't the dramatic confrontation many had expected, nor was it a formal lesson. Instead, the gym witnessed something more nuanced, a dialogue between generations, between approaches to physical discipline. Chuck demonstrated a basic stance, feet positioned precisely, weight distributed evenly. The goal isn't to be unmovable, he explained. It's to be centered, so that you can move efficiently in any direction. Titan mimicked the position, his bodybuilder's physique initially working against the balanced posture Chuck was showing. His first attempts were stiff, mechanical. Relax your shoulders, Chuck instructed quietly. Power doesn't come from tension. It comes from alignment and timing. Gradually, Titan adjusted, his body adapting to the unfamiliar positioning. Chuck nodded approvingly. Better. Now, when someone pushes you, he demonstrated with a light pressure against Titan's shoulder. Don't resist directly. Redirect. They worked through the principle several times. Chuck, applying pressure from different angles. Titan learning to absorb and channel the force rather than meeting it with rigid opposition. The process was unglamorous, technical, focused on fundamentals rather than flashy techniques. Around them, the atmosphere in the gym transformed. What had begun as spectacle evolved into something more genuine. Some onlookers drifted away, disappointed by the lack of further confrontation, but many stayed, watching with genuine interest as an impromptu masterclass unfolded before them. Maya had repositioned herself closer, observing intently. She caught Lena's eye across the circle, both women sharing a look of surprised appreciation at the unexpected turn of events. DJ had cautiously resumed filming, though his approach had changeless focused on dramatic angles and reactions, more on documenting the technical details Chuck was sharing. As they worked, something remarkable happened to Titan. The performative aspects of his personality gradually receded. His questions became more specific, more genuine. His movements, initially stiff with self-consciousness, grew more fluid as he concentrated on the mechanics rather than how he looked performing them. The principle applies to everything, Chuck explained as they worked through a simple redirection technique. Whether it's a physical attack or a verbal one, meeting force with force just creates more resistance. Redirecting conserves your energy and uses your opponents against them. Titan nodded slowly, processing the concept. So all that stuff earlier, the deadlifts, the burpees. Different tools for different purposes, Chuck replied. There's nothing wrong with building strength, but strength without control is just wasted energy. For nearly 20 minutes, they continued Chuck, demonstrating principles of balance, leverage, and efficient movement. Titan attempting to incorporate them, occasionally succeeding, frequently failing, but approaching each attempt with increasing sincerity. The transformation wasn't complete. Titan still carried himself with the unconscious swagger of someone accustomed to dominance. But something had shifted in his eyes. A seed of understanding planted that might, with time and reflection, grow into something more profound. Finally, Chuck stepped back, signaling the end of the impromptu lesson. That's enough for today, he said. Mastery comes from consistent practice, not single sessions. Titan nodded, breathing heavily from the concentrated effort. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to proceed, the familiar script of public bravado no longer fitting the situation. Thank you, he said finally. The words simple but clearly difficult for him. That was educational. Chuck inclined his head in acknowledgement. You have natural gifts, he observed. Strength, coordination, determination. Those are valuable foundations. Titan absorbed the compliment without his usual preening. recognition flickering in his eyes, that this validation from someone who had earned their authority rather than claimed it carried weight that his usual social media adulation couldn't match. The circle of onlookers had thinned but remained respectfully attentive. Phones were still raised, still recording, but somehow the energy had transformed from voyeuristic excitement to genuine appreciation. Chuck turned to address the broader group. "True martial arts isn't about dominating others," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite its measured tone. "It's about mastering yourself. The external techniques are just tools to develop internal discipline." His gaze returned to Titan. "Strength isn't measured by how intimidating you appear or how loudly you proclaim it. It's measured by how you respond when challenged, whether you react from ego or respond from center." The words hung in the air, not as a rebuke, but as an invitation to Titan specifically, but also to everyone present. An invitation to reconsider what strength really meant, what mastery really looked like. DJ lowered his camera, the live stream forgotten. "Man," he murmured to no one in particular, "that's the realest thing I've ever filmed." Titan stood silent, absorbing Chuck's words. The bodybuilder who had entered the gym that morning, loud, aggressive, desperate for attention, seemed like a character he had been playing rather than his authentic self. In the quiet aftermath of genuine connection, something more substantial emerged: a young man with potential beyond his physique or personal brand. "I have a lot to learn," he admitted finally, the simple acknowledgement representing perhaps the most genuine strength he had displayed all day. Chuck nodded, a hint of approval warming his expression. "That recognition," he said quietly, "is where real progress begins." Around them, the gym slowly returned to its normal rhythm, weights being lifted, conversations resuming, workouts continuing. But something had changed in the atmosphere, a subtle shift in what was valued and respected within those walls. Maya approached, phone lowered, and addressed Chuck directly. "Thank you for that demonstration, Mr. Norris," she said. "It was an honor to witness." Chuck smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious demeanor. "The honor is in sharing knowledge that was shared with me," he replied. "That's how traditions stay alive." As the group dispersed, Lena approached Titan, who stood somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the mat, watching Chuck return to his own routine. "You know," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "it takes a certain kind of strength to listen when you could have just walked away angry." Titan glanced at her, searching for mockery, but found only frank assessment. "I don't know if I should be embarrassed or grateful," he admitted. "Maybe both," Lena suggested with a slight smile. "Growth is rarely comfortable." He nodded slowly, eyes drifting back to Chuck, who was now performing a series of fluid movements that seemed deceptively simple, yet spoke of decades of disciplined practice. "I've spent years building this body," Titan said quietly, almost to himself. "But I've never thought about movement the way he just showed me." "Different approaches, different results," Lena replied. "Your way has its place, so does his. The question is whether you can learn from both." Titan stood thoughtfully for a long moment, then pulled out his phone, no to live stream or post, but to make a note. He typed something quickly, then slipped the device back into his pocket. "What was that?" DJ asked, having approached in time to witness the uncharacteristic action. "A reminder," Titan replied, "to look up some classes." Across the gym, Chuck continued his routine exactly as he had begun it that morning, with focused precision, quiet discipline, and the fluid economy of movement that spoke of true mastery. He hadn't come to teach or to prove anything. He had simply come to train, to continue his own unending journey toward perfection. Yet in doing so, in simply being himself when challenged, he had offered the most powerful demonstration possible: that real strength doesn't need to dominate to be recognized, doesn't need to shout to be heard, doesn't need to perform to be real. As he moved through his exercises, several younger gym members watched from a respectful distance, seeing with new eyes what genuine mastery looked like. Not flashy or dramatic, but profound in its simplicity. Not aggressive or domineering, but powerful in its control. And in a culture increasingly obsessed with appearance over substance, with performance over authenticity, a quiet reminder had been offered. True strength speaks for itself. It doesn't need to announce its presence. It simply is. The aftermath settled over the Iron Temple like the gradual clearing of smoke after a fire. Members drifted back to their workouts. Conversations buzzed in hushed tones, and the usual rhythm of the gym slowly reasserted itself, though subtly altered, as if the space itself had been recalibrated by what had transpired. In the far corner, Chuck Norris continued his training routine exactly where he had left off, moving through his exercises with the same focused precision he had demonstrated throughout the confrontation. There was no triumphant strutting, no playing to the lingering glances sent his way. His workout remained what it had always been, a personal discipline, not a performance. The way he transitioned between movements held the same economy of motion that had made his demonstration so compelling, nothing wasted, nothing for show. Titan had retreated to the locker room shortly after their exchange, the weight of the public lesson visibly heavy on his shoulders. DJ had followed, camera finally lowered, concern for his friend temporarily outweighing his professional responsibilities. The abrupt shift from performative confidence to genuine vulnerability had left both young men disoriented, operating without a script for perhaps the first time in their professional relationship. "You okay, man?" DJ asked as they entered the relative privacy of the locker area. His voice carried an unfamiliar gentleness, stripped of its usual hype, man energy. Titan sat heavily on a bench, staring at the floor. His massive frame seemed somehow diminished, as if the personality that had animated it had temporarily withdrawn. For several moments, he didn't respond. When he finally looked up, his expression held none of the performative bravado that usually animated his features. Instead, there was something raw and uncertain, the face of a young man rather than the carefully crafted persona of Titan. "I don't know," he admitted, the words coming slowly, as if excavated from somewhere deep. I didn't expect that." DJ nodded, settling beside him, the expensive camera resting forgotten on his lap. "Yeah, that was intense. But hey, the stream numbers were insane. You probably gained thousands of followers." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notifications. "Comments are blowing up. Even the negative ones are engagement, right? That's what you always say." Titan's face twisted with an emotion. DJ couldn't immediately identify something between disgust and revelation. "Is that all you think matters?" he asked, the question lacking its usual edge, instead carrying a genuine weight of introspection. DJ blinked, caught off guard by the shift. "I mean, isn't it? That's the whole point, right? Building your brand, getting the numbers up?" He gestured vaguely toward the gym beyond the locker room doors. "That's what we do." Titan stood abruptly and moved to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. The shock of it seemed to ground him, bringing him more fully into the present moment. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. The carefully cultivated physique, the expression he had practiced countless times for maximum impact on camera. The tattoo across his upper back that spelled out his chosen name in aggressive, stylized lettering. For perhaps the first time, he saw himself through external eyes. "What if it's not?" he asked, the question directed more at himself than DJ. "What if all this," he gestured at his reflection, "is just empty?" DJ shifted uncomfortably, uncertain how to navigate this unfamiliar territory. "Look, you had one bad moment with a legitimate legend. It happens. We'll spin it somehow." He forced a laugh that fell flat in the tiled space. "Maybe humility challenge or something? People love redemption arcs." Titan didn't respond, still studying his reflection with newfound criticality. He flexed experimentally, the motion so habitual it was almost unconscious. But this time, instead of satisfaction, his expression reflected something closer to puzzlement, as if wondering who exactly this performance was for. Out on the gym floor, the ripples of the confrontation continued to spread. Maya had approached Chuck again, this time with a specific question about one of the techniques he had demonstrated. Their conversation was quiet, focused. The interaction between serious practitioners rather than celebrity and fan. Chuck answered her queries with the same patient attention he might give a student in a formal dojo, neither condescending nor holding back. "So that redirect you used?" Maya asked, her hands moving to demonstrate the motion. "It's about feeling the energy first, right? Not just reacting to what you see?" Chuck nodded. "Visual cues can be misleading. Your opponent can fake with their eyes, their shoulders. But energy doesn't lie." He demonstrated the subtle shift in weight that had allowed him to evade Titan's attack. "Feel it here." He touched his center. "Before you respond." Maya nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson. Unlike many who had witnessed the confrontation, her interest wasn't in the spectacle, but in the mechanics, the underlying principles that had made Chuck's demonstration so effortlessly effective. Nearby, Lena was fielding questions from several younger gym members who had witnessed the exchange and now looked at the training space with new eyes. The standard gym equipment, the benches and racks and machines suddenly seemed limited, constraining, compared to the fluid movement they had just witnessed. "So all that stuff about stance and balancios that really make that much difference?" one young man asked, his typical routine of isolated muscle exercises momentarily forgotten. He mimicked the balanced position Chuck had demonstrated, his movements awkward but earnest. Lena smiled, adjusting his posture with gentle pressure on his shoulders. "It makes all the difference in the world," she replied. "Strength without proper mechanics is just wasted potential." What Mr. B.A. Norris demonstrated was efficiency maximum effect with minimum effort. "But Titan is way stronger, physically," another member pointed out, glancing toward the locker room where the bodybuilder had disappeared. "He lifted more weight in the deadlift. He's got to be twice Chuck's size." "There are different kinds of strength," Lena explained patiently. "What you witnessed wasn't about who could move more weight. It was about who had greater mastery of their own body and mind." She demonstrated a simple stance adjustment. "This isn't just about fighting. Every physical discipline benefits from proper alignment and control." The conversation continued, spreading across the gym floor like ripples in a pond. Quiet discussions about technique versus showmanship, about substance versus appearance, about what constituted real strength and mastery. In small groups, members experimented with the stances and movements they had seen, laughing at their own awkwardness but persisting with genuine curiosity. In the locker room, Titan had made a decision. He stood before the mirror one last time, then deliberately removed the flashy tank top emblazoned with his logo, replacing it with a plain gray t-shirt from his bag. The transformation wasn't dramatic, but it was symbolic, a small step away from performance and toward authenticity. He emerged back onto the gym floor, his usual swagger noticeably subdued. His eyes scanned the space until he located Chuck, still working through his routine in the corner. The martial artist had progressed to a series of precise kicks, each one executed with the same control and precision he had shown earlier, despite being well into what must have been an exhausting workout. With deliberate steps, Titan crossed the floor. Members watched with renewed interest, wondering if another confrontation was brewing. Conversations paused. Phones were raised again, anticipating fresh drama. DJ trailed behind, camera raised once more but hesitant, uncertain what role he was meant to play in this unexpected development. Chuck sensed the approach and paused his exercise, turning to face Titan with neutral awareness. There was no defensiveness in his posture, no anticipation of conflict, just calm presence and attentive focus. Titan stopped at a respectful distance. For a moment, he struggled visibly with what to say. The script he had relied on throughout his public career, suddenly inadequate. The carefully crafted catchphrases and provocations that usually rolled off his tongue seemed childish and inappropriate in the face of Chuck's quiet dignity. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, the words coming out stiff but sincere. "What I did earlier, the way I approached you, was disrespectful." A murmur rippled through the nearby members who overheard. DJ's eyes widened behind his camera. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Another voice replied, "Shh, I'm recording this." Chuck regarded him thoughtfully, his expression neither dismissive nor eager to accept. He seemed to be assessing the sincerity behind the words, weighing them against the actions that had preceded them. Then he nodded once in acknowledgement. "Apology accepted," he said simply. The brevity of the response left Titan momentarily adrift. In his world of exaggerated reactions and dramatic exchanges, such understated acceptance was unfamiliar territory. He shifted his weight, clearly having expected either more resistance or more affirmation. "I also wanted to ask." He hesitated, glancing self-consciously at the phones still recording around them. Then, with visible effort, he pushed forward, "If you'd be willing to show me more sometime, not for content or anything, just to learn." The request hung in the air between them, vulnerable, genuine, perhaps the first truly authentic moment in Titan's public life in years. The young bodybuilder's face reflected the cost of this exposure, the risk of rejection, the abandonment of the safe, familiar role of provocateur. Chuck considered this, his expression thoughtful. His eyes moved from Titan to the watching crowd, then back again. "Martial arts isn't about quick lessons or shortcuts," he said finally. "It's a lifelong journey of consistent practice and self-improvement." Titan nodded, absorbing the implicit challenge in the statement. A hint of his old defensiveness flickered across his face, then subsided. "But," Chuck continued, reaching into his bag and extracting a small notebook, "if you're serious about learning, there are people who can help you start that journey properly." He wrote something down and handed the paper to Titan. "This is the address of a traditional dojo where I sometimes train when I'm in Los Angeles. The Grandmaster is a friend and an excellent teacher. Tell him I sent you." Titan looked at the paper as if it contained something far more valuable than an address. His hands, capable of deadlifting nearly 500 pounds, handled the small note with surprising delicacy. "Thank you," he said, carefully folding the note and placing it in his pocket. Chuck nodded once more, then returned to his routine, clear but respectful dismissal. The interaction had been brief, but its impact resonated throughout the gym. It wasn't dramatic or performative, but it carried an authenticity that everyone present could feel. Titan stood for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, his usual swagger replaced by something more measured. The transformation wasn't complete. Years of habitual behavior don't change in a single moment, but something had shifted fundamentally in his bearing. DJ hurried to catch up, confusion evident in his expression. "Dude, what was that about?" he asked, gesturing with the camera. "Are we still filming or what? What's the angle here?" Titan stopped and looked directly at the camera for the first time since emerging from the locker room. His expression was complicated, a mixture of exhaustion, uncertainty, and something that might have been the beginning of clarity. Without warning, he reached out and gently pushed the lens down. "Not everything needs to be content, DJ," he said quietly. "Some things are just life." DJ's mouth opened, then closed, no words emerging. This was so far outside their established dynamic that he had no prepared response. He lowered the camera completely, the gesture somehow symbolic of a larger shift. Across the gym, Maya had been recording the exchange on her phone. Unlike DJ's approach of maximum drama and reaction shots, her filming had been steady, focused on the substance of the interaction rather than its spectacle. Now, she stopped recording and opened her social media app. With careful consideration, she composed a post to accompany the video clips she had captured throughout the morning. Witnessed something remarkable today. Not a fight, but a masterclass in what real strength looks like. It's not about who can lift the most or shout the loudest. It's about control, efficiency, and the quiet confidence that comes from genuine mastery. Thank you, at Chuck Norris, for the reminder that true power doesn't need to announce itself. Real strength, martial arts wisdom. She hesitated briefly before hitting post, aware that her perspective ran counter to the sensationalized narratives that typically dominated fitness social media. In a world of clickbait titles and manufactured controversy, such measured reflection might go unnoticed or dismissed. Then she pressed the button, sending her authentic observation into the digital world, a small act of faith that substance might occasionally triumph over spectacle. Near the entrance, Lena was finishing up with a client when she noticed Chuck gathering his things, apparently preparing to leave. She excused herself and approached him, stepping carefully around a group of members who were still practicing the basic stance he had demonstrated earlier. "Mr. Norris," she called, extending her hand. "I just wanted to thank you for how you handled that situation earlier. It could have gone very differently." Chuck shook her hand with a warm smile that transformed his serious features. "The hardest battles are the ones we fight with ourselves," he said. "That young man has potential beneath all that noise." Lena nodded in agreement. "You gave him something to think about. All of us, actually." She gestured around the gym, where the energy had noticeably shifted, more focused, less performative. Several members were working in pairs now, helping each other with form rather than competing for mirror space. It's easy to forget what real training is about in the age of likes and followers. "The fundamentals don't change," Chuck replied, zipping his modest gym bag. "The packaging might, but the core principles of discipline, respect, and consistent practice remain the same across generations." Lena's expression turned thoughtful. "I've been trying to get management to let me start some basic self-defense classes here. Maybe after today, they'll be more open to the idea." "Worth asking," Chuck agreed. The best gyms balance building the body with training the mind. As he prepared to exit, Chuck paused and surveyed the gym one last time. The space that had nearly become a battleground had transformed into something else. Place of potential learning, of recalibrated values. Not for everyone, perhaps, but for those with eyes to see, and the willingness to look beyond the surface. Near the weight racks, Titan was quietly helping a younger member with proper form on a basic lift, not filming, not performing, just sharing knowledge with simple focus. The shift was subtle, but profound, like the first tentative step on a new path. Chuck nodded to himself, satisfied, and pushed through the glass doors into the bright Los Angeles sunshine. Behind him, the Iron Temple continued its daily business, weights lifted, goals pursued, bodies challenged. But something invisible had shifted within its walls. A reminder had been offered, not through lectures or force, but through quiet demonstration. True strength doesn't need spotlight. Real power isn't measured in followers or likes. Genuine mastery speaks in whispers, not shouts, and its impact endures long after the noise has faded. In a world increasingly dominated by appearance over substance, by volume over depth, Chuck Norris had delivered his most important lesson without saying much at all. And in the thoughtful silence he left behind, new understanding began to grow. The door swung closed behind him, but the weight of his presence and the wisdom of his example remained. Some lessons don't need words. Some strength doesn't need proof. And some statements are most powerful when delivered in silence. Outside in the parking lot, Chuck walked unhurriedly to his practical, unassuming sedan rather than the flashy sports car one might expect from a Hollywood legend. As he reached for his keys, he noticed a small figure sitting on a bench near the gym entrance. It was Maya, apparently waiting for him. She stood as he approached, her posture respectful but comfortable. "Mr. Norris," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for what you showed us today, but for how you've carried yourself throughout your career. It's meant a lot to those of us who take martial arts seriously." Chuck smiled, the expression warming his weathered features. "You're a practitioner," he observed. It wasn't a question. She nodded. 8 years, still learning every day. "Always," Chuck agreed. "That never stops. That's the beauty of it." Maya hesitated, then said, "My post about what happened today, the video I shared, it's already going viral. But I wanted you to know. I tried to frame it the right way. Not as a confrontation, but as a lesson." Chuck considered this. "The internet will see what it wants to see," he said finally. "But perhaps a few will understand the deeper message." "That's my hope," Maya replied. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the understanding between serious martial artists transcending the need for many words. "What do you think will happen to him?" Maya asked eventually, nodding toward the gym where Titan was still visible through the glass front, now speaking with Lena. Chuck followed her gaze. "That depends entirely on him," he said. "Some lessons take root immediately. Others need time to germinate. And some seeds never grow at all." He shrugged slightly. "Our responsibility ends with planting them." Maya nodded, understanding the wisdom in not becoming attached to results. "Keep training," Chuck said as he turned toward his car. "Not for others, but for yourself. The truest measure of growth is the one only you can see in the quiet moments when no one is watching." "I will," she promised. As Chuck drove away, Maya returned to the gym, her perspective subtly altered by the day's events. The Iron Temple's lights gleamed against the darkening sky, the space inside continuing its daily rhythms but with a new awareness humming beneath the surface. In the back corner, several younger members had cleared a small area and were practicing the basic stance Chuck had demonstrated earlier, their movements awkward but sincere. Near the front desk, Lena was speaking animatedly with the gym's manager, gesturing toward the open floor space, apparently proposing something new. And by the water fountain, Titan stood in conversation with an older member, a retired boxer, who came in 3 times weekly and rarely spoke to anyone. Their discussion appeared earnest, Titan listening more than speaking, nodding occasionally, his usual performative energy notably absent. Maya smiled to herself as she collected her gym bag. The ripples would continue spreading, in ways both visible and invisible. That was how real change happened, not in dramatic confrontations or viral moments, but in the quiet aftermath, when the spotlight faded and the hard work of transformation began. Outside, the address Chuck had written for Titan remained safely tucked in the bodybuilder's pocket, a potential door to a different path. Whether he would walk through it remained to be seen, but the possibility existed now, where it hadn't before. And sometimes, possibility was enough. As night fell over Los Angeles, the gym's bright interior stood in contrast to the darkening city, a beacon of activity against the growing shadows. Inside, people continued lifting, striving, improving, each in their own way, for their own reasons. But something had shifted in the collective understanding of what strength truly meant. Not just the ability to move weight or dominate space, but the capacity to remain centered in chaos, to respond rather than react, to learn rather than defend. The lesson would fade for some, dismissed as quickly as it had arrived. For others, it would linger as a curiosity, occasionally remembered but rarely applied. But for a few, those ready to receive it, the silent demonstration would take root, growing into something that would transform not just their training, but their approach to life itself. And in this way, mastery perpetuated itself not through loud proclamations or viral content, but through quiet example and the weight of authenticity. In a world of increasing noise, Chuck Norris had reminded everyone of a fundamental truth: that sometimes the most powerful statement is the one delivered in silence. And sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what you can impose on others, but in what you have mastered within yourself. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.